I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14. It is baseball season. We are 24 hours away, less than that from the start of it. And I've got a special guest to help me preview the season. And boy, we got a lot to talk about in the SEC. If you're an LSU fan, you know this man. If you know the game, you know this man. He's Dan Canevari. He is coached at LSU, Miami, six-time national champion, head coach of Southeastern Louisiana, pitching coach, podcast guy, you name it all. Did I leave anything out there, Dan? That's a lot to bite off.
Athletic director at LSU, and I also worked for Tiger Athletic Foundation as a fundraiser and did a TV show with Skip Bertman for a few years. So we had a lot of fun.
And does a baseball contest with a complete stranger when he has the time. So in any case, thank you for joining us. A reminder, our content brought to you by BetOnline. It continues to be your number one source for all your basketball wagering needs, including pro and college hoops throughout the year. With up-to-the-minute odds, stats, trends, you can follow your favorite teams' path to the playoffs with in-game live betting, contests, all the best player props. Experience the world's best wagering platform anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices. Head to BetOnline today. Become part of the team. Remember to use our promo code BLEAV. That's BLEAV for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline. Well, the game starts here. Well, the games ended last year in Omaha with a heavy SEC presence. Obviously, LSU, the national champions. Florida, the runners-up. Tennessee was in Omaha. The year before that, Ole Miss took home the trophy. Year before that is Mississippi State. Year before that was Vanderbilt. It is a dog-eat-dog league. It is hyper-competitive at the top. We got another fun one setting up. We got, 5 or 6 SEC teams in the top 10. How do you see the league from the top down this year, Dan?
The league is the way it's always been. It's unbelievably balanced. Every weekend that you play, it's a war, and anybody can beat anybody. So there's no easy marks on the schedule. Back when I was coaching, when I first started in the early '90s, you could play Vanderbilt and consider yourself at least 2 out of 3, but 3 out of 3, or play Kentucky. And you look at now, Vanderbilt's got national championships under their belt, a beautiful park that they redid, a great coach. Kentucky just built a brand new facility. Now Ole Miss is in the mix. They weren't in there back in the day. It's just grown and grown and grown. And a lot of that has to do with the television contracts. Football, college baseball has grown in popularity. And then the SEC schools, there's so much fan involvement in the sports. It's such a big part of the culture in the Southeastern Conference that it's trickled into baseball, and now it's starting to trickle into women's basketball and softball.
Yeah, the biggest example, our home state of Tennessee, where Tennessee fans, they didn't draw flies for a long time. They got good in baseball. They've caught the fever as much as anybody. They sent a ton of fans to Omaha. You saw Mississippi State take over the park a couple of years ago. A little longer tradition in Starkville, but it's just crazy. Like Kentucky, even I think sold out the park for regionals last year. Not a place that traditionally does that. I think Missouri is really the only one that needs to maybe catch up to speed. But I mean, that's a team that's put Max Scherzer in Major League Baseball, and they've had history and tradition of their own in the Big 12. They get to this league and it just eats you up.
Well, Missouri's got to upgrade their facilities. Right, they're way behind on facilities. But you look at the other programs. Arkansas is there every year. They were a foul pop away from winning a national championship. You look at what's been done. Ole Miss Stadium, Mississippi State Stadium. Florida built a new stadium. They're actually ones that are dragging behind in attendance. But you look at South Carolina. Ray Tanner was there. They won a couple in a row, built a new stadium, and now they're a powerhouse in the SEC, fighting. Every year they're in the top of the mix. So it's like you say, it's dog eat dog, Chris, and with the transfer portal, it's really changed everything.
Yeah, it has. I think it's made for more parity. I don't know if it's made it a better game in some ways, but you just look and I mean, I'm trying to decide. I'm going to do power rankings in the morning. My goodness, God help you if you can sort through these teams because there's going to be so much parity.
No, there's a parity because if somebody's playing on a team and they're not playing as much, or they're playing behind someone that's a good player, people and players aren't willing to work and wait like they did back. No one wants to redshirt. Okay. The other thing is, if I was at Southeastern, if I'm at a school like Southeastern or a mid-major school, which is magnificent. I mean, I enjoyed my time at Southeastern, and of course, the mid-major schools. But the problem is now, if you get a good freshman, okay, he plays a year. It's like going to junior college. Somebody's going to grab him with an
Yeah.
NIL, going to transfer out after the first year. So the big schools with the NIL money, the SEC, the big crowds and everything, they pretty much, it's free agency every year. And that's
Yeah.
creating only so much to go around. And guys are going to these SEC schools to play. So for example, at LSU, Michael Braswell leaves South Carolina to go play shortstop at LSU.
Yeah.
That's and they bounce around, and there's not a lot of regulation as to where they can go.
Yeah. I mean, Colby Shelton leaves Alabama, where he was freshman of the year candidate, now playing at Florida. LSU, of course, did very well for itself in the transfer portal a year ago. It's just, it's crazy, and it's going to be crazy at the top this year. Top 10 teams you see in LSU, Arkansas, Florida, Vanderbilt, A&M, Tennessee. I've seen is all top. I think all are top 9 teams if you want to be technical within D1 baseball. Let's just take those 6 teams. I mean, we got another tier of good teams after that I could argue some of those would crack that top group. But is that a top tier? Do you see separations in any of those teams? Did the pollsters get it right? What do you think?
I don't know if anybody can get it right because the bottom line is a brand new team with everybody every year. For
Yeah.
one, like you're talking about the transfer portal, LSU picked up Luke Holman, and he's one of the top
Mhm.
pitchers. I mean, he was in Alabama last year. It's a tough thing to know. The biggest thing is injuries are going to play a
Yeah.
part. I mean, the most important coach on the staff is the physical therapist and the trainer, because everybody's got great coaching talent. Everybody works hard. Everybody's got great facilities. Who stays healthy? Who doesn't? Who gets hurt at the wrong time? Somebody gets hit with a pitch. He's out for 3 weeks. It changes your whole season because, like I said, every weekend you could go 3-0 or 0 for 3. Doesn't matter who you're playing.
I think your depth point is a good one there, and it's probably the reason I think I'm going to start LSU at the top. And it's, I mean, sure, winning the national title, having that pedigree, having a coach who's been there at other programs in Omaha, Jay Johnson help. Yes, it does. But I look at what LSU had a year ago. You had guys that were studs as freshmen, Brady Neal, uh, Braxton Clean, guys like that were highly rated that hit when they had the chance to play. But that lineup was so deep, a lot of those guys sat down when it got to the second half of the season in Omaha. As other guys made way. I mean, they've had a couple of catchers that have been there forever. Jared Jones, another guy last year, he did play more than some of the others. You look at the pitching staff, they bring back Hughes and Herring, uh, Gavin Guidry. Those guys were really good down the stretch. They added Holman. Thatcher Hurd came along late. I like the lower kid from Xavier they got. He had really good numbers there. He's a heavy ground ball guy, can go long innings. Javin Coleman, the freshman they brought in. I mean, they brought in several great freshman arms. If you want to start with teams that are deep and can withstand injuries, I think that team is set up very well on both sides.
I think you're absolutely right on the offensive side slash defensive side with the position players. There's a lot of depth there. LSU got a lot of quality freshmen. Okay, the biggest thing is, you bring in a guy like Max Bingham, who's an all-Pac.
Yeah.
He's going to be in the outfield. Kling, who's going to be a high draft pick. He's got great tools. Was hurt and then kind of didn't play. But the bottom line is, you've got Tommy Tanks, you've got Braswell, you've got Josh Pearson at second base, you got Milazzo, you got Neal behind the plate. Milazzo was a key player last year, but remember, like these guys, Neal, Paxton Kling, okay, Jared Jones, are all played, and now they're coming back as a sophomore with playing experience at the highest level, and were there for a national championship, experienced it, and they're hungry for it, where they're a major part of it. I think that's a big thing. From coaching wise, you don't have to motivate those guys. Prove that they play. Got great leadership from Milazzo, but you've also got great leadership from Tommy White, who's been there, and of course one of the key figures on the team. And then you go on and on about those players, but the biggest thing with the depth, Chris, is they've got 10 lefties and they're probably 20 deep on the mound.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. And they've got some quality freshmen in the infield, quality freshmen on the mound. Jay's been in his third year now. he's got it where it's layered correctly. You got the right amount of seniors, fifth-year seniors, 3-year guys, 2-year guys, and freshmen coming in, so that they're really have a hole in the recruiting. He's got it all,
Yeah.
and that's what a good coach does. LSU's tough, and Jay's an excellent coach. I would agree with you. I think they have to be the pick
Yeah.
to DC. They're number 2 in the nation right now, behind Wake Forest. I think that's a coin flip as to which right now are the best 2 teams.
Yeah, I don't know Wake Forest as well as I know the other rosters, and I know they added Seaver King, and they've got some arms back. I think Hartle's back, and they've got some dudes. But it's hard to. I look at these SEC teams. It's hard to imagine somebody thinks there's a team out better than some of these teams we're about to discuss.
Yeah, no, it's the cream of the crop, and it's always going to be that way. It's been that way for the last 10 to 15 years. The rest of the leagues are trying to catch up to the SEC. Every team can play. I can't see a team that you couldn't say could win the national championship in the entire league. And then let's face it, you're going to be adding Oklahoma and Texas to the mix.
All right, let's go to Florida. Well, I don't know if Florida is number 2. I think it's got a good case. So several other teams do, but we'll go with the Gators right now just because of that runner-up status. It got maybe the National Player of the Year and Jack Caglione, the two-way guy everybody knows. We noted that. It's Shelton. They bring back some guys in Curlin and Heyman and Shelnut who hit pretty well. Ty Evans came on really late. The pitching, Kevin O'Sullivan always has pitching. Cade Fisher is, I think, primed to be an ace. Slater threw well for them. Caglione's control is allegedly improved. I think I need to see it in a game before I completely buy in. And then they've got Jameson, some guys in the pen, and they added a star-studded recruiting class. I think LSU's got a little more depth and maybe a little bit more proven, but Kevin O'Sullivan's right up there with Tim Corbin at guys that can develop pitching. And I always tend to lean towards teams that are pitching heavy. So I think that's where Florida's got to be in that conversation at the top just because of that and that pedigree.
Of course, Kevin, before he was the head coach at Florida, he's a great pitching coach at Clemson. That's where he made his mark. And it's always a great thing when your head coach is a pitching coach because, one, you're going to recruit pitching if the head coach is pitching. 2, that's his expertise, and you can coach pitching more than hitting. You can take guys with good arms that pitch, and you can improve it. Hitting is tough. It's a gift, putting the bat on the ball. You can improve a hitter, but pitchers you can improve, I think, a lot better and a lot quicker. Sullivan's got the ability to do that. The other thing is the state of Florida is a great baseball state. I was there at the University of Miami, coached at the high school and collegiate level in the state of Florida, recruited there many years. Just great baseball. And Florida, for people that aren't from that state, don't realize that the University of Florida is the state in the school. You've got a lot of schools, but Florida's the kind of like the flagship. It's the one that was the original big school in Florida. Florida State's kind of second. Miami's down there at the end, at the southern end as an independent. Well, they were an independent when I played, but as a private school, not a state school. Florida's going to draw a lot of people, and they're right on the Georgia line, so they get a lot from that Georgia baseball-rich community, East Cobb and that area. So it's going to be good every year, and O'Sullivan's a great coach. And like you said, they got a lot of depth on both sides of the ball.
Maybe the next team, speaking of teams got a lot through the draft, I don't think anybody got more through the draft than Arkansas. Dave Van Horn feels like he's sort of due to win one of these. Sometimes you just bang on the door, although that didn't happen at Florida State. But most of the time you do it enough and you get there. I think their 3-man rotation that they start with Hagen Smith, Brady Tigert, Mason Molina from Texas Tech, it was very good there. I think their threesome is probably, in terms of what they've proven, as good as anybody's. You'd like to see Tigert be a little more durable and throw more innings before you make that with complete confidence, but he was very good when he threw a year ago. They've got some guys back in the pen. They added a bunch of freshmen. The offensive side, it's not going to be his best lineup, but they hit the portal. They filled some holes with some guys. They've got a guy like Kendall Diggs back. Peyton Stovall, I think, hasn't really lived up to the promise that he had when he came in, but he's a kid who's gifted and can hit. Depth everywhere. I think this team is going to be up there with those others too, potentially.
Dave Van Horn is one of the best coaches in college baseball. He's been doing it a long time. He's been on the brink of winning a national championship. Every year he's in the hunt, and he does a real good job. And of course, Arkansas, one of the most beautiful parks you can go to. Great facility, and they've grown every year. Every year, got a great fan base. They've got all the ingredients, but in this baseball, if you're at the top of the heap every year and you're in the mix every year for a national championship, sooner or later you're going to break through. It's just got to
Yeah.
fall. And, like I said, Dave was a foul ball away from
Yeah.
winning the championship. You can't get any closer than that. And I just think he's due. They're a very scary team. They're always highly competitive, much like Dave is, and highly competitive. They play solid baseball, and they really play well at home. So look for them to be right up at the top of the heap, like you say.
All right, let's speaking of coaches that took a while to break through, and he's since won two. Tim Corbin at Vandy. I'm in Nashville. I see them play a lot. They've got a very interesting roster because you look up and down their lineup. They do not have the thumpers that Florida's got, that LSU's got, that Tennessee's got, that A&M's got. And the pitching staff, it is not as top heavy with an obvious guy like a Carson Fulmer or a David Price or a Kyle Wright, but they got a lot of good guys. If Carter Holton could be that guy if he can stay healthy. They've got a ton of arms, though. They got a freshman in Ethan McIlvain, who they've kind of anointed as the next guy, which Tim doesn't tend to do. So for him to say that, let you know that kid's got some serious stuff. They're deep. They've got some experienced arms in their bullpen. I think they're going to be a lineup that 1-9 is tough to pitch to, but they don't have that guy. I mean, it could be Vastine, could be Diaz, but they don't have that guy like a Caglione or a Tommy White. And I think that's kind of where people separate them from the rest of the pack. But man, they are deep and they are balanced, and they're going to play an older school type game with speed and defense, athleticism, bunting that maybe you don't see as much. I think they're a very interesting team because I could see that season going where they're the last one standing at the end, or I could see them being a team that maybe misses the second weekend because the things that we're concerned about got them in the end.
Well, like you mentioned it, they're going to play Vandy boy baseball, and that's Tim Corbin's brand of baseball. Tim Corbin, excellent coach. They play high energy, solid fundamental, come at you, have many different ways to win on the bases. They're going to beat you with a hit. They don't have the dude, like you're saying. They
Yeah.
don't have the lineup that puts fear, but they play 1-9. They use their lineup well. And in this day and age, there's a lot of parks with the turf. And of course, when they're at home, they play great turf ball. Play that speed baseball. A lot of great, highly competitive athletes. And Corbin's going to have them there. And of course, they always do a great job with the pitching. And so that's going to keep them in the ballpark, keep them in every ball game. And again, they'll be there at the end. They'll be in the hunt. They'll be in the postseason, hosting a regional. And if things work right, you could and not blink.
3 hours to the east of Vanderbilt, Tennessee. And I think people might be sleeping on this team a little bit. The thought is that the pitching is down a little bit. They had Dollander, Burns, and Beam the last couple years. That's hard to beat anywhere, anytime. But they're going to move A.J. Russell into the rotation. Guy struck out 45% of hitters last year, walked 7. That's amazing. You look up and down their pitching staff. These guys do not put a lot of guys on, which is a big thing. The ratios are as good as anybody's. They keep the ball in the park pretty well, given that they play in a bandbox. I think Frank Anderson is as good at developing pitching as just about anybody. I think their pitching is going to be a little bit. Now, the question is, does a Russell or somebody like that, do they take the next step up? Can you go from being a 1-inning guy, maybe a 2-inning guy, to a guy that can give 5 or 6? Now, it's a big difference in endurance. We'll see. But I like the track record of what they got. They've got some guys that have thrown some innings. The lineup, adding Billy Amick, I think that helped a lot. I don't think it's as good a lineup as they had 2 years ago, but they've got some guys with some thump. They got Christian Moore, who was you could see him be a 2020 guy this year, which doesn't happen often in college baseball. They've got some JUCO depth off the bench, I think. I think this is the team. They finished strong last year. Very interested to see if they can make that translate into this season.
Well, Tony Vitello does a great job up there. He's a great recruit. Has great pedigree, come through the ranks. Great player at Missouri. I think you're spot on, Frank Anderson, one of the best college pitching coaches. He gets the most out of his pitchers. He does a good job in the college game, and the fact, like you mentioned, Chris, they throw a lot of strikes. If you throw strikes, you put it in the zone. You always got a chance to win. Pitching never goes in a slump if you do it right. Uh, I think they're a high percentage team, and again, playing in a bandbox, power's always there. If you play in a bandbox, that park the ball jumps out of the place. So they when they play at home, they're tough to beat. That means a lot in the SEC. If you can win 2 out of 3 at home, every weekend, you're going to be right in the hunt for the national championship.
Yeah, and I think what was really impressive, they got sent to Clemson, which was a tough regional, and then they got sent to Southern Miss on the coaching retirement tour, and came out of both those environments to Omaha. I thought that's a spot where I think if you're sitting in the other dockets, you're a little worried that team got a little confidence with that postseason run.
And they've got they got a little chip on their shoulder. They were supposed to get.
Yes.
You always got to be scared of a team that's got a chip on their shoulder. It's got something to prove.
Yeah. All right, this team's got something to prove on the mound. It's Texas A&M. I'm seeing A&M as a top 10 team nationally. This is one where I'm having a little trouble, to be honest, Dan, because I look at what they brought back last year. I know Nate Yeski's at LSU now. Felt like the finger got pointed at him whether fairly or unfairly. Look, they've got some pieces that I like. They get Ryan Prager back, who was decent a couple years ago. Justin Lampkin's a guy that it was good for them a year ago. Chris Cortez is a guy that's got some talent, and they got the Aschenbeck kid, who's kind of their Swiss Army knife out of the bullpen. It's always good to have one of those guys, especially in postseason. But I'm just not sure the pitching is up to everybody else in the lineup. They added Braden Montgomery. They got some good transfers out of the portal. The Camarillo kid out of Cal State Northridge had a really nice season. Ryan Targach was hurt last year. That kid's got massive power as a second baseman. I think he's going to have a better year. Their lineup has got a chance to be as good as anybody's. I'm not as sure about their pitching. I know they always got talent, but that to me is a place where maybe that team separates from the rest of the pack, because I'm not sure the arms are going to be there with everybody else's, but they could be.
I agree with that. I think I don't know if you point the finger at Nate Yeski, but looking at the history, Nate Yeski, college pitching coaches in the nation. I think that's a big loss for Jay Johnson to woo him away from A&M. Of course, he worked with Jay at Arizona. Nate Yeski's outstanding. I've watched him work. I think that's a big loss, probably bigger than some players, to lose a coach like that. And again, he only had a couple of years with Schlossnagle. Schloss now going into his 3rd year, and with Nolan Kane as his recruiting guy. Most coaches, you're going to see whether they're going to make their move into the national scene in their 3rd year on the job. Because the first year you kind of figure out who's there. The second year you bring in some recruits, and now you've got the guys that you kept from the year before, and you make your run. And in your 3rd year, you should have all the people that are on your mission moving in the same direction, and that's when the program has to escalate. So I think this is a pivotal year for Jim Schlossnagle. They'll always have talent. Great state of Texas. Plenty of NIL money at the Texas A&M. Great facilities. Great coach. They have to make a move this year. I'm not sure if they can make it. I don't know if they have the horses right now.
All right. This next team up, I think, is very interesting. And I think maybe I could argue slightly underrated. I think this team is kind of a poor man's Vanderbilt. And here's what I mean. The pitching, I think, is going to be really good. I'll get to that in a minute. But the lineup, I'm not sure about now. It's old. It's got guys like Will Hodo, Bryce Eblin, who feel like they've been there forever. Matt Gassett, who was at Florida before that. They hit some guys through the transfer portal that were maybe good, not great. TJ McCants in center. I thought he was a really good player at Ole Miss as a freshman. I think they had some personal issues. I think his mom passed away. Be interesting to see if he can reset and have a real good season in Alabama. The Petrich kid they got from Maryland's a real good hitter. But, man, they're pitching. And, boy, if they didn't get rated in the portal with some of their guys, we might have been talking about them a little sooner. Ben Hess is super talented. So is Riley Quick. Alton Davis was good. They added a couple kids in Alcock and Buchanan from Gardner Webb and Southern, who threw a lot, Wofford threw a lot of innings last year. They've got some other guys back in the book. Hagan Banks. I think this is the team. Rob Walton did a tremendous job at Maryland. I feel like they've got a lot of pitching. I think the lineup, I compared it to Vanderbilt. I'm not sure much the lineup's going to hit. Doesn't have the pop that other guys do, but it feels like to me if they can be cohesive, because when you add the portal, you just never know. They've got a chance to be really, really good on the mound.
Well, I think they've got a chance. I think with the new coaching staff and with the turmoil that happened there last year, that was a big blow to the program. Of course, in this day and age, with the transfer portal and with the NIL, I think it took a blow. I think they're a couple of years away from being back to the top of the pack. I think Coach Walton's going to have to figure out the SEC a lot different from where he's been. It's going to be quite a challenge, and I think they still have to get more talent and get more cohesive and get a system in place for them to recruit in the type of players that are going to fit his system.
Give me some things where it's a challenge jumping into the SEC, because Rob Walton did a great job at Maryland. That program really wasn't much till Eric Bakich kind of put her on the map. They have cold weather disadvantages. It's not a hotbed of college baseball. So I tend to look at it and go, that's a guy that came into a tough spot given all the turmoil at Alabama a year ago. And I thought flipped the roster pretty quickly. But it is a different animal in the SEC.
Well, again, every weekend is a war. Number one. Number two, the coaches are all great. Everybody's got assistant coaches, large staffs. So there's a lot of scouting, a lot of work can be done, a lot of individual work can be done because, there's large budgets with the big football. It's not the same where Maryland was. And so it's a lot different thing. Plus, you've got big crowds every weekend, and that's different. You'll feel the pressure. And I think he's going to feel that kind of pressure, the fan pressure. You're in the media every time. You're in the newspaper. There's cameras in your face. You're on social media. There's podcasts like we have, websites, everything. It's going to be a transition year. It's like a freshman coming in trying to play as a freshman. Even though he's been at Maryland, it's not the same as the SEC. To quote it just means more in the SEC.
Yeah. All right, down the road from Alabama's Auburn. I think Butch Thompson gets more out of his team year in and year out than anybody. So I feel like wherever I pick them, it's probably going to end up being too low. The offense, again, it's not a scare you on paper group. They did get some high on base transfers from lower leagues, and Butch has made that work before with Sonny DeShera and some of the kids he's brought in. They've got some guys, I think Irish and McMurray are big power guys at catcher and first, had really good years a year ago. Irish can, I think, really be a stud. Bobby Pierce and Stanfield are back. Seems like those guys have been there forever. On the mound, they got a lot of guys coming back. I don't know that they were great arms, but they're arms that have pitched a lot of ball. And if Joseph Gonzalez is back anywhere near where he was before, he was an ace, and he'd give them one on par. I'd say above most SEC teams. I think this team's going to be very interesting, Dan.
I think they're a team that you got to watch out for. And I think the biggest thing, for Butch, who's a very good coach and, of course, good pitching coach, when he was an assistant coach, they got to get out of the chute in the SEC better than they have the last couple of years. They seem to come out slow and then come out at the end. And I think good effort early, stay with it, stay on top, get their confidence up, and start bulldozing some teams and run, where he's winning 14 out of 16 in the SEC. That kind of a run. And then they got a shot at Omaha. But they seem to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, get out to a slow start, play well for a little while, and all of a sudden go in a hole for a couple of weekends. I think the consistency of them playing week in and week out, that mental toughness is what really needs to show this year for Auburn to really be in that upper echelon of the SEC.
What do you make of Georgia? Because that was a very interesting situation. Georgia's a team where commitment is kind of been behind the rest of the league. Football's king down there. And you can throw a rock and hit talent in Georgia. So I've always thought they should have won at a higher level than they did. And I thought when they brought in Scott Strickland, he's a guy that got Kent State to the World Series. Just never happened for him for whatever reason. This is a complete roster flip. Well, not complete. They've got some building blocks. They got Corey Collins back. They got Condon back, who's a top 5 pick. I thought some of their guys like Goldstein, Finley threw well for them down the stretch a year ago. Chandler Marsh being another guy. But they went heavy in the portal. They had one of the better portal classes in the country. First-time head coach, a lot of new faces. What do you make of Georgia?
I think Georgia's a year or two away. Coach Wes Johnson, great guy. Met him, spent some time with him at LSU when he was there. Of course, great pitching coach, was in the major leagues, been in Arkansas, been around the league. High energy guy, good coach. But I think they are about a year or two away of recruiting classes to really get to where they have to be. It's hard to recruit when your coach is rumored to be fired. That's number
Yeah.
one. Number two, you bring in a guy that's coming in off a national championship. Okay, as a head coach, he's a new guy, but with the portal and everything, everybody's let's wait and see. I'd rather go here because they're rebuilding, and then you lose some players to the portal. They haven't had a lot of success. The facilities aren't up to speed. I think what West has got to do is they're going to be improved this year with what they have. Okay, they have to show some improvement on their facilities and their NIL. And West, who wasn't the main recruiter at LSU, as a head coach, he's got to get some people out there. They got to recruit that Atlanta, Georgia area. They got to get some Omaha type players in, and he's got to get out in the national recruiting scene. And I think it's going to take a year or two to do that. And the improvement this year will help the recruiting next year and the year after that. Again, always look at a coach in a 3-year window. Jay Johnson was kind of unusual, but the difference with Jay Johnson and winning in his second year, their coach didn't get fired. Paul Maneri was retired. Georgia, the coach got fired, and then there was a lot of people left, and the people that stayed, a lot of guys were staying, but they didn't win, and that's why the coach got fired. So it's a tough transition. You got to change mentalities, and anytime you have a new coach come in, it takes a while for the team to get used to that new coach. You get some new coach adrenaline, but you got to have some talent, and you got to have a couple of years of good recruiting to really get in there and get the program to where it needs to be. Look for them to be middle of the pack down near the bottom of the pack this year.
Now, here's another team that's interesting. I feel like we say this with all the teams, but this is the SEC. I watched South Carolina play mid-April last year in person for 3 games. And I felt like leaving that weekend, even though they lost the series at Vandy that I was at, I left thinking that's a national title caliber team. The injuries killed them. The pitching injuries, I think, were particularly harmful. And this team lost its confidence, got its footing back a little bit late, maybe, did get a regional win, and then got ousted before Omaha. But you look at the lineup, they've got one of the best players in the country in Petrie. The 2 Vandy transfers, Cass has had a big year for him last year. Parker Nolan's their second baseman now. Cole Messina is about as good an offensive catcher as you'll find in this league. They got Jones and Becker at the top of that rotation, and they've got Veach, who's a little bit of a utility knife out of the bullpen. I really liked the job Mark Kingston was doing last year until the injuries just took their toll. And I'm wondering if the rebound year, I think they could make it interesting again.
Yeah, they're a team to watch. They were successful. They held it together. The coach is still there. He's done a good job. Mark's a good coach, does a good job recruiting. And like you said, if not for the injuries, they might have been one of the top teams in Omaha. Okay, but injuries play a big part. If they can stay injury-free and they can get that confidence going, all the way through the season, they're a team that I think can be in that upper echelon at the end of the year if they stay injury-free.
The Mississippis, and this again speaks to the depth of the league, how quickly it can fall apart on you. State's got a lot of bats back, but couldn't throw anything last year, just gave up runs in bunches. The lineup is interesting. Dakota Jordan's a potential first rounder. I just don't know if that pitching has been decimated to the point where they can compete with the rest of the league. Of course, they fired a pitching coach, I guess, midseason a year ago. It's just kind of amazing how quick it's fallen. And then now you got the issue. You mentioned having coaches being on the hot seat hurting recruiting that got that kind of going against him. I'm wondering if this is a year that they can salvage it because everywhere you look, everybody in this league is going to be tough to beat.
I think it's a tough one for Chris Lemonis to salvage. 2 years not making the tournament. It's hard to recruit to that in the SEC. Yeah. And then you fire your pitching coach mid-season, and then, of course, the rumors, if he doesn't get it done this year, he's gone. No one's going to make that kind of commitment. He's got to do a heck of a coaching job this year, and the fans there have to get behind him, not work against him, because that's part of the power of Mississippi State is the fans and the fan base and the stadium. So again, it's going to be a tough year, I think, at Mississippi State.
Ole Miss, it brings back its rotation. Those guys, it wasn't very pretty a year ago. They were all transfers from lower level schools, I think. Saunier might have been a freshman there. But in any case, the lineup lagged down the stretch. They get the Mallett's kid back, who in the back end of the bullpen was really good 2 years ago. That's going to help. But that's another one. It feels like there's a gap between that roster and that upper echelon of the league.
Well, they got hurt with the transfer portal. They had a lot of guys leave. And but Mike Bianco is a great coach. You know, he's proven himself. Won in Omaha. Mike's going to work his tail off. Mike's personal friend, and of course, coached together for years. And he's going to get it together. They're going to have some players. They're going to outcoach some people. It's tough at Ole Miss because again, with football, with the upswing with Kiffin, and with basketball taking upswing with Chris Beard. I hate to say this, but NIL money comes into play in baseball and other sports, and they're kind of leaning towards those money-making sports. Mike has been there so long, and the baseball programs made money. They're kind of like, well, we can leave them alone, but we really got to get this basketball going. And again, every school, there's only so much money that you can allocate to NIL. Unfortunately, that's the way the game is now. So I think Mike's just got to do a great coaching job to be right in the hunt. I think he's good enough to host a regional. I don't know if he's going to be good enough to get to a super regional. I think the big thing is, like they did when they won in Omaha, can they get hot at the right time? And if they can do that, they got a chance to be in Omaha.
I thought Nick Mingione at Kentucky last year should have been at the forefront of the coach of your conversation. I can't remember who won it now. But in any case, I thought the way that he moneyballed together a roster with some lower profile transfer guys, they put a whole lineup together. They get a lot of that infield back. I felt like they pieced their pitching together a little bit like Mississippi State did 2 years ago, except without the two studs at the top. I think they got some of those guys back. Nick was nowhere on anybody's radar last year, and Kentucky wasn't. They started hot. They scheduled well. They got that RPI up to where they got to eventually host. I don't know really what it looks like for them this year if he can do that 2 years in a row, but I thought he did such an outstanding job a year ago with that I feel like now that he's got a blueprint to do that, they're going to be a tough out on the weekends too.
Well, you said it. You said he's got a money ball type of approach. You know, he's piecing it together. He's trying to hide, playing the percentages, trying to get on base guys, put players together. Okay, much like the Oakland A's. Okay, they are going to win games over the long haul, but when you get to the postseason, it comes down to two things: do you have a dominant pitcher, and can you hit a 3-run homer? I mean, that's how you win in the SEC. That's how on the weekend. That's how you win in the postseason. That's how you win in Omaha. And if you don't have that power in your lineup, or you don't have the couple of arms that can get out there and shut it down when you get to the postseason, because everybody else has got a good arm, it's very, very difficult to win. Because as you play and you get deeper in the SEC, or you get in the postseason, the pyramid effect takes place. Guys don't make it. Guys throw you out. They hold the runners. They hit homers. You don't. They're not going to swing at pitches out of the zone. The players are better. So I think that Moneyball approach works, but it doesn't work in the postseason, and especially in Omaha.
Yeah, they just didn't have enough. And I think they ran into LSU second weekend too, which good luck beating those guys in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And there's going to be a lot of that. It's just hard. But Mangione does a good job with that method, and maybe that's the way you have to do it in Kentucky. They're weather challenged. They get a great weather challenge, and the state's not a hotbed for baseball. So it's a basketball state. So again, NIL money comes into play. There's a lot of different things involved there. Football's on the rise. That's where the money is. Basketball, of course, is one of the tops, if not the top in the country. So he's kind of the lower tier. At his own school to get this thing to the next level where you really have to go out and have a lot of NIL money and bring in some top-notch draft picks to play.
Speaking of coaches, I think do a good job. One of them I thought did the best with what he had and got fired anyway. Steve Beazer. I watched Missouri out of the gate last year. I watched them. I can't remember which tournament they were playing at, but they pulled off a couple of wins against some regional type teams. Watched them on TV. Thought, hey, these guys might have something this year. and there's no margin for error up there. The injuries hit. I think you get into the league, just the grind of week in and week out can kill your confidence. I think that's what did it with them. Kyrus Jackson comes in. He's a good recruiter, ties to Missouri. Did get Danny Corona from Wake Forest through the portal, which was, I would have to think, an upset. But this is just a team. I look at the tiers, and I feel like they're going to start at 14 and maybe a distant pace behind whoever's 13.
Well, Carrick, of course, coached at Southern here in Baton Rouge. I was at Southern for a while. He came right after me. Good guy, good coach. For a while, he worked with, Major League Baseball in a developmental role in coaching after he left Southern. Before he went to Southern, he worked with Scott Boras Agency, of course, and, was a recruiter for them. And so, he knows the recruiting circuit. He's a very good recruiter. But again, weather challenged big time. Challenged NIL wise and challenged facility wise, and that's a tough place to win. Carrick's going to improve him. He's going to be get the best they can out of Missouri. But again, 2 to 3 years away, you got to see where he's going to be and how much of a commitment is Missouri going to make to be in the front as a athletic department. I think that's big. Again, they're making a move in football, and they're going to invest their money where they think they're going to best return. Baseball might not be that one, but I'm happy for Carrick. It's an opportunity to coach at Missouri, which he's very, very tied into that university. So I think that's a good fit.
Thank you for getting his name right where I did. And I was thinking of the former Georgia wide receiver, and I completely botched it. But how far are they behind everybody else? I know they've got some of the what's the word? Some of the high end tech stuff and some things like that. They have spent some money on that, but I think you're right. It's just everybody in this league is now all in on baseball, and if you're not, you're way behind everybody else.
Got to buy in. You got to build a stadium. You got to get fan base. You got to get people in there, because with all the opportunities out there in the SEC, playing the SEC. I don't mean this as an insult, but you're not going to pick Missouri over Southern, over Miss. Okay, let alone LSU, Arkansas, and all these other teams. It's the way it is today in baseball. You got to get the top players to do that, and it's hard to recruit there. There's just not a lot to recruit to. So much like Kentucky did, they spent a lot of money on a ballpark to try to get in the hunt, and I think Missouri has to do that.
Dan, I think if I've counted it right, I think we've hit all the teams. Any parting thoughts? Any big storylines that we should have covered that we didn't get to?
No, I tell you what, I just think SEC baseball is the best in the nation. I think you're going to see a big shift in the next couple of years in college athletics with NIL, with the transfer portal, with TV contracts, and I think next year the SEC adding 2 more teams is going to change. But I see that college athletics is going to change the next 2 to 3 years. We don't know how that's going to go. It's going to be driven by football, by NIL, and by TV contracts. You may see 25 to 35 teams be in their own division, separate from the NC2A, with their own set of rules. And if that's the case, you may see baseball with 25 head count scholarships and unlimited coaching staffs, because there's going to be a lot of money at those schools, and they're going to play by a different set of rules than the rest of the people. And so I think college baseball is going to change here in the next 3 to 5 as a result of the change that's going to take place in football, which drives all.
Yeah, I'm concerned about it too. And the Title IX, I don't mean to be disrespectful to women's athletics. I had a niece that played college basketball. Glad she got the opportunity. My concern is if that continues to be an issue that can't be worked around, what it's going to get to is it's going to be football, maybe basketball, and how many ever women's sports that you need to get to your equal scholarship number. And I worry that baseball gets squeezed because, like LSU, Ole Miss, some of those schools that make a profit on it or close enough, they'll find a way. But I'm worried they won't. You will look around, you won't find enough guys to field a competitive NCAA tournament with.
Yeah, well, I think the one thing is with gender equity, I'm all in favor of women's sports. I think they all deserve. But let's get real. When you're figuring out equity, you got to take football equation. I mean, You just got to take it out. It's different. It's the U.S. Treasury for a
Yeah.
university. A whole different animal. You can't live without it. You can't have a high level athletic program without a high level football. The TV money drives it all. I mean, after football, I think it should be gender equity. This is just my opinion. I think it should be even. I think the women should get everything the men get, but you got to take football out of it. You really
Yeah.
do. Really be fair to college athletics and to really understand how the budgets and everything works. I think that's fair. I think men's basketball and women's basketball should get the same. I think softball and baseball should get the same. Track and field, men and women's tennis, I think they all should get the same. But there's nothing compares to football. No sport in the world.
Dan, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed it. Cannot wait for tomorrow when baseball season kicks off, and I know you're right there with me.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Chris. Enjoyed it, and good luck to you.
All right, that's Dan Canevari. I'm Chris Lee. We're Southeastern 14. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.